Let's go ahead and get started. Our topic verse for the study that we've been doing is James chapter 1, verse 19 and verse 20. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, for the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. We're talking about dealing with difficult people in our lives. We talked about pessimistic people last week. This week we're going to talk about helping needy people. We all deal with needy people in some aspect of our lives, right? But how do you help people without hurting them? Right? How do you love the needy without losing yourself in the course of it? So we're going to look at a couple of verses this morning. So we're just going to read a couple of verses here, and then we'll jump into this. Chapter 6, verse 2. Most of us know this verse, right? Bear you one another's burdens, so fulfill the law of Christ. Most of us can remember that one. What's interesting, right, is in verse number 2, he tells you, bear each other's burdens. In verse number 5, he tells you, every man ought to bear his own burden. All right? Obviously, when Scripture tells you to bear each other's burdens, it's not talking about a totality of all burdens at all times and all spaces, right? Anyway, so Mark chapter 6, verse number 31, here's Christ speaking. He said unto them, come ye yourselves apart into the desert place and rest a while, for there are many coming and going, and they had no leisure so much as to eat. So God calls us to bear one another's burdens, right? There's no doubt about that. But what he doesn't call us to do is to take responsibility for everybody. Right? And so you've got to be able to balance compassion with wisdom in the course of your life, and you've got to be able to encourage others to lean on Christ, right? Which is ultimately our goal in helping those who are in need. We don't just want them to lean on us, right? So think about this, right? You jump in the lake to save somebody who's drowning, right? That person has the potential. Right? In fact, they're very clear about the potential. If you have ever taken a water safety course, they're very clear about that person's potential to drag you under with them. Right? In their panic, they may pull you under too. Right? And sometimes that's what happens when we try to help people who are in need. It becomes overwhelming, especially if they constantly need our help. Right, or constantly need us to affirm them, right, or to validate them, or constantly need us to support everything that they're doing, right? And so what I'm going to talk about in this lesson, right, is how do you support people who are overly dependent, right, without becoming drained yourself, right? How do we point them to Christ, because he's truly the source that we want to point them to, right, the overarching theme of what we're going to talk about is basically this, right? Compassion is not codependency. Love carries burdens, but it also encourages responsibility, right? And so if you don't know what codependency is, codependency is not a positive thing, right? A lot of people are very codependent or can be very codependent in the course of their lives. And that means that person is dependent upon another person, right? Overly so, in such a way that if that other person slips, right, or they don't give them the support that they feel like they need, right, then they blame that person for their failings, right? That's what codependency is. So we're going to look a little bit at some of this morning. So we are, without a doubt, called to bear one another's burdens. There's no doubt about that. Galatians 6:2 tells us that. Bear you one another's burdens, right? That's how you fulfill the law of Christ. Compassion, though, is a Christ-like attribute. Right? Jesus modeled care for hurting people over the course of his life. When you take the totality of Christ's life and you look at the totality of Christ's life, certainly Christ was modeling for us a compassion that showed concern and not just thoughtfulness, right? Or feelings, right? But actual actions for the hurting. He fed those who were hungry. Right? The feeding of the 5,000 is a good example, but that's not the only example in Scripture. Christ fed those who were hungry. He comforted the grieving. Right? Christ had no problem with taking a knee with those who were grieving. Right? Mary and Martha are a good example of that. Right? He shows up and raises Lazarus from the dead, but he grieved with them before he did that. Right? He restored the broken. Right? The story of the prodigal son tells us that Christ restores broken people. And so Christ was a model of compassion. We are, as believers, we're called to reflect his mercy, his compassion through our lives to the lives of those around us. That's how we help the hurting. We do not help the hurting of our own volition. It's not our desire or our way, right? That's not how we help the hurting. It's not, right, well, I'm just such a nice guy, such a good person, right? I'm a good human being, so I help other people, right? No, I'm just reflecting the mercy of Christ in my life. It's why people who, Scripture tells you this as well, right? But people who have been forgiven much, right? They forgive much, right? People who have experienced much mercy show a lot of mercy. So when you find believers who are not very merciful in their actions, what does it tell you about them? It tells you that they don't believe that God's shown them much mercy, or they don't believe that it took much mercy to save them. But if they believe it took a lot of mercy to save them, they'll express that same mercy to others, right? So what does bearing one another's burdens mean? Bearing burdens means walking with somebody through the course of their trial. It means getting in the yoke with somebody, right? It means assisting them, right? When most of us understand a yoke of oxen, right? That's two ox, right? That are in one, right, piece, they use that piece to keep those two ox pulling the same load together. They help each other pull that load, right? It's like if you've ever seen somebody, right, their car runs out of gas, right? Somebody will pull over and help them push, right? Then somebody else pulls over and helps them push, right? The more people that are pushing, the easier it is to move that car, right? But if the guy who ran out of gas is just going to sit in his car, right, with his arms folded, he's not going to get a whole lot of help, right? He needs to get out and be one of the ones that helps push, right? That's what bearing one another's burdens, that's the picture of bearing somebody's burdens, right? So bearing one another's burdens is not about fixing every problem that somebody has. This is going to blow your mind, right? You haven't fixed all your problems. So how narcissistic do you have to believe that you can fix somebody else's? Right? You can maybe think that I'm a little pessimistic or whatever, but one of my favorite things to do is to read people's comments, especially negative comments, online about whatever, right? In the pastor world, it's always about what some other pastor is doing, right? This pastor's doing that, or he's doing this, right? And guys will be like, well, I bless God, that's not spiritual, and this is the reasons that this is unbiblical and that's unbiblical. I'm like, look, champ, I don't want to be offensive to you, but not everything's going on in your ministry is all biblical either. Right? Don't lose your mind here this morning, but not all of us sitting in this room right now, we have not got our Christian lives all together. I mean, there is some of us that are still struggling with it. I know it's not you, but some of us are. Right? And so, but bearing one another's burdens is helping them, right? It is not about fixing all their problems. It's helping them to carry the load that they're under. How do you help somebody carry the load that they're under? Well, that's simple, isn't it? You stand on the side and you tell them all the ways that they're carrying it the wrong way. Right? Lift with your knees. That'll help. Right? Listen, that's not the way you do it, right? That's like, right? There's one of my favorite things to watch on like Instagram Reels and stuff is a guy started a long time ago, right? He was the originator of it, but he would drive by people that had just been in an accident, and then he'd roll down his window and yell out the window to them, "Hey, you can't park there!" And it was really helpful. Everybody cusses him out and all kinds of stuff. It's great, right? I think it's hilarious, right? But right, he's not being very helpful, right? He's not helping them bear their burden, right? So, but that's how a lot of us as believers, that's how we think we're helping people bear their burdens, by explaining to them all the things that they're doing wrong. That's not helping anybody, right? But what we're trying to do, right, is we're trying to be empathetic, right, about their situation. Some things, right, especially right? Not everything is a physical burden, right? Some things are spiritual burdens, right, or emotional burdens. And so sometimes all you can do is be empathetic towards somebody and say, hey, you know what? Like, I can feel your pain, right? I get it, right? Some of us, that's hard for us, right? If you're not an empath in any way, right, it's hard for you to feel empathetic towards people. Some of us can't even feel sympathetic towards people, much less empathetic towards people, right? And so, but, right, it's saying, hey, look, right, like I get it. Sometimes it's just being present with somebody, right? What do you do when somebody's just lost a child? Right, you can't bring them back. You can't help them by bringing that kid back, right? And there's nothing you're going to say that's going to make that situation any better, right? We have a family member who is in a situation like that with a family that she knows, right? Where more than likely it's not going to be a whole lot longer, right, before that family loses one of their children. What do you say? Sometimes you don't say anything because you don't have anything to say. You just feel for them, right? You're present with them in their pain, right? And certainly you pray for people, right? When somebody sprains their ankle, what's the fix? Is the fix like for you to push them around in a wheelchair for the rest of their life? No, this is a temporary condition, right? They may need your help to get to the ambulance or whatever, right? Like Ethan when he got that tiny little sprain, and right, went to the doctor and they told him that it was broken, but whatever, right? But listen, somebody sprains their ankle, you're not going to, right, push them around in a wheelchair for the rest of their life. You're not going to carry them everywhere they go for the rest of their life, right? But you're going to help them while they're in need, right? That's what it is to bear somebody else's burdens. It means offering somebody support basically while they are healing. The Bible tells us this, right? Romans chapter 12, verse 15, rejoice with them that do rejoice, weep with them that weep, right? Both of these situations are temporary situations, right? You rejoice when it's time to rejoice. You weep when it's time to weep. That's what it is to bear somebody's burdens, right? Every person has a load to carry. You've got a load to carry, right? That person has a load to carry. That's why the Bible tells you in verse 5, every man shall bear his own burden, right? So when it comes to helping someone in need, I can only help someone in need that is willing to get in the yoke with me and pull, right? That's the only person I can help that's in need. You've got to be willing to bear your burden too, right? That is helping somebody in need. The person who sits down and says, there's nothing I can do, I can't fix it, I'm never going to be able to get past this, that's it, it's all over, right? That person can't be helped until they're willing to get up, right, and shoulder at least a portion of the load. I will help you shoulder your load, but I can't carry the load for you, right? This is a struggle that a lot of parents have, right, over the course of watching their children grow. Right? What happens? The parent comes along, right, and solves all their kids, bears all their kids' burdens for them. Their kid never learns how to bear any burdens. And because their kid never learns how to bear any burdens, that kid reaches the age where they should be able to become independent, and they can't become independent because mom or dad has always shouldered all the load. Right? My generation, by the way, has a problem with having raised our kids that way. Right? We were raised feral. Right? My generation, we were feral kids. We were kicked out of the house at 8 o'clock in the morning. We came back in when the street lights came on. Right? That's basically right. Listen, my generation was told all the time, right? Go outside. You know what kids, right, that have grown up under my generation's parenting have almost never heard? Go outside. Right? We're scared somebody's going to steal them or whatever, right? We were so feral, nobody wanted to steal us, right? Because it was kind of like trying to pick up a stray cat. You were liable to get scratched, right? So, right? So my generation, honestly, right? I have this conversation with guys in my friend group, right? That listen, we've had that problem with some of our kids because we shouldered all their burdens for them too much, right? We never let them become independent. Right now, our kids are suffering some pain because it's hard to become independent when you've never had to shoulder any burdens whatsoever, right? But listen, some burdens are there just to grow you, right? God puts burdens on you to mature you. That's mature. Listen, nobody believes that somebody is mature who hasn't ever faced anything. It's why we often look at people at adult children of celebrities and billionaires and millionaires and this kind of stuff, and they still act like children. Like, I know this will date me a little bit, right? But this was the problem with Nicole Richie and Paris Hilton back in the day, right? The Kardashians, I guess in your guys' generation, would be the best example of it. They're still children. They're not adults, right? They've never gone through anything that would cause them to mature, right? It's burden that causes you to mature. It's weight that makes you mature in life, right? And so when we come along and we pick up somebody's burden for them, instead of letting them bear their burden, right, we're not helping them. Now, can we come along and help them pick up that burden? Absolutely. Right? But eventually, they're going to have to shoulder that burden by themselves. I can't walk with them for the rest of their lives. Right? And so, listen, there are responsibilities God uses, right? Burdens that God uses to mature us. Right? There's lots of them. Work. You know what will mature you? Go to work. It'll mature you. You know why? Because you find out that all your coworkers, they really don't care what your problems are. They don't care that you have a headache. They don't care that you stayed out late last night. Show up. Go to work. Nobody cares. You know what makes you realize? Man, I need to grow up. Right? Work is one of those things that God uses to mature us. Right? Relationships. God uses relationships to mature us. Right? Nobody knows how to fix a relationship better than somebody who's not in one. Right? That's why I watch all these, right? TikTok relationship experts, right, that have been through 12 relationships. They're probably not the best person to take your relationship advice from. Right? It's like going to Liz Taylor for marriage counseling, right? No, seriously, this is the 8th one, but I'm going to keep him, right? On one of the cruises we went on, they did a Broadway show called Six, right? The Six Wives of Henry VIII, right? That he killed every single one of them, by the way. At least he didn't divorce them. So man, right? That's not the person you want to go to for relationship advice, right? But relationships grow you. One of the number one relationships that will help you to mature in your life is when you have your first kid. Because you know how to do everything until you have that first kid, and that kid doesn't listen to nothing you say, does whatever they want, runs all over the house, right? You say, man, I'll never let my kids stay up late. That kid's up while you're going to sleep, right? They're bouncing off the walls. I put the kids in bed last night. In the girls' room, they have this little light thing, like it's a ball that lights up, right? Like a night light for them. And I'm walking back by, and I had to throw something into the girls' room. I opened the door, and Natalie's sitting on her bed with a book. Right? Right? Listen, man. You know what kids do? They mature you. Right? Everybody says, kids will keep you young. No, what kids will do is they'll make you grow up because you realize there's something bigger in this life, right? You get married, it matures you. Right? When you start to date, it matures you. Right? That first breakup that you have over the course of your life, man, it matures you, right? Those things mature you. Relationships are things that God uses to mature spiritual growth, obviously, as well. Listen, when you over-help somebody, right, you do too much on their behalf. What you are doing is you're technically robbing them of the maturity that they could have. You're robbing them of those lessons that help them to mature. Am I saying don't help anybody? No, what I'm saying is don't go too far in the way that you help other people, right? Over-functioning, right, will lead to under-functioning. If you always rescue somebody, what happens is they become dependent on you to rescue them, in their bad situations. And they're not dependent on the one who is the source of all rescue, right? Which is Christ. Right? What we want to do is we want to point people to Christ. We don't want to be the knight in shining armor. Right? What people need to do, right? What our job is to do, and what people need is they need to learn to trust Christ, right? And own their own life. They need to take ownership of their growth. I'm not responsible for your growth, right? This is why when people leave churches and they say things like, right, well, I just wasn't being spiritually fed. Well, that's not my responsibility. I'm not here to spiritually feed you. You've got a Bible, right? You can grow spiritually. Just read your Bible, right? You have to take ownership of your own spiritual growth. I'm not responsible for your spiritual growth. You're responsible for it. And if you are, that's why churches, right, can do more harm than good in some cases by producing a program for every little niche in the church, right? And pretty soon, right, all of your spiritual growth is represented by a program in the church, and you're not responsible for any of it. No, you need to be responsible for your spiritual growth, right? Zane Hodges said, helping people too much can become a subtle form of control because it feeds their weaknesses and it inflates our pride. This is why a lot of pastors will go out of their way to help people, right, who they should have stopped and made those people take ownership of their problems, right? It's because it inflates that individual's pride, right? Well, I'm smart. I help them. I'm the go-to guy. Whenever they got a question, whenever they got a problem, they always come to me, right? That's just, all that does is it's just inflating the guy's pride, right? You want to buy a house, you should talk to me. You want to buy a car, you should talk to me, right? No, what you should do is you should look at your finances, figure out how your finances work, and what you can afford and what you can't afford. Take ownership, right? These are the things that we ought to be doing. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 10 tells us, for even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. You know what about bearing each other's burdens? Come on, Paul. I thought you said bear one another's burdens. What's Paul's point? Paul's point is not too far, right? If you're out of work for a couple months, hey, we'll take care of you. Right? We'll bring food by the house, right? That kind of thing. But we're not going to keep bringing food by your house if you're going to sit on the couch and, right, watch TV. That's not what this thing's about, right? Even Jesus took breaks, right? Mark chapter 6, verse 31 that we read just a minute ago, right? Come yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while, right? Service, right? Whether that's ministry like I do, right? Or whether that's just service to others, it has to include a margin in your life. Right? After Christ ministered to crowds, he always called the disciples apart. Caring for others is obviously a godly thing to do. What a lot of people don't think is godly is rest, but it is. I've been in the ministry for a long time. I've been to a lot of preachers' conferences and stuff like that, right? And these guys will get up and they'll say, all right, bless God. You know, I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I pray for 2 hours and then I do this and I do that, you know, and by the time that the guy's done, you know, if he's sleeping at all, right, you know, he's taking cat naps in between because, bless God, I'm so on fire for Jesus. Listen, the guy's lying. Straight up, it's a lie. But even if God built him that way, that's not God hasn't built everybody that way. Christ needed rest. We need rest. You know what sometimes you have to do? Sometimes you got to take a step back and take some rest, but take ownership of the fact that you're still required to bear one another's burdens. So if you've got to step back from reaching out to people for a while, that's fine, but that can't be your whole life. You've got to go back to reaching out to others and bearing one another's burdens still. Right? Listen, if you don't rest, you will burn out. Here's what happens, right? Fatigue makes you fills you with bitterness and resent. I've watched it with pastors. I've watched it with church members, right? But when people get tired because they have overextended themselves, you know what they get? They're full of bitterness, man. It happens in families, right? You let a man in a family work, kill himself to feed his family and take care of his family, right? And never, right? Maybe there's not enough appreciation or whatever, right? But there's just never a rest in that situation. You know what happens? That guy gets bitter. And he says, you know what, if this is what it is, right? If all I am is a paycheck, right? Then fine, I'll just be a paycheck. You go find somebody else, and I'll just pay the alimony, the child support, whatever. Ends a lot of relationships because people get bitter if they overwork themselves. Right? If you don't take a step back and rest from time to time, it's not a good thing. It's not good in the ministry. It's not good, right, in family matters, right? What happens is you get resentful, and then you begin to neglect what God's called you to do. You neglect your family, you neglect your spiritual life, those types of things, and it's never positive, right? Sometimes the reality is that saying no is the most loving thing that you can do. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do for your family. Sometimes you need to tell your own family, no, we can't come to that. This is the first weekend we've had in 6 months that we don't have something planned. We can't come to that. We're staying home. Leave us alone. Right? Sometimes it's the most loving thing that you can do. Listen, it's like a phone that's not been plugged in a long time, right? It's not helpful. If your phone doesn't have any battery life left, if it's dead, you know what it is? It's a brick. It's worthless. That's what it is. Yeah, but there's a lot of information in there, and that thing's very, very powerful. Yeah, but it's got no use if it has no charge. And you're the same way. You're of no use if you don't charge yourself from time to time, right? That's why Jesus often withdrew himself to pray, right? Our job, bearing one another's burdens, means encouraging healthy dependence on Christ. Right? Our goal is not to become someone's savior. That's not what we're trying to do. That is what a lot of people do, right? That's why, right? Psychiatrists, right? Psychologists, right? A lot of them, right? There are some psychiatrists and psychologists that are very good, but there are some who their entire goal is to make you completely dependent upon them, so you've got to keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back. Does two things. It feeds their ego, feeds their bank account, right? There's a lot of people that's the exact same way that they are, right? They keep you dependent on them as the only person that can help you with your problems, and so that you have to keep coming back. Right? There's entire church models that are built on this. Right? And the people are not at church because they're there for Christ and to grow spiritually. They are there because they desperately need some help with something. It's not positive. It's not good. Right? Our goal is we're not trying to, right? We are a conduit of grace, but we're not the source of it. Our job is to encourage people to go to God in prayer and trust him to provide for them. Sometimes we are the provision that God sends. But we're not always the provision that God sends, right? Teach people the spiritual disciplines and not just write a formula for the solution. Listen, you stop doing everything for the people in your life that need help. That's not good. It's not positive. You are not helping them. I know you think that you are. But if I take my hands off the wheel, they will go down in flames. If they go down in flames, it won't be because you took your hands off the wheel. It will be because they didn't put theirs on it. Listen, you've got to show people, teach them to read their Bibles, to pray, to build a relationship with Christ. Charles Ryrie said, dependency becomes unhealthy when it replaces God with a person. Some of you may be in a relationship where you're the one who's on the other end of this, and somebody else is bearing your burden for you, and you've quit trusting God. You've replaced God with a person in your life. That's not good. A lot of people do this with their pastor. Their pastor becomes God to them. And then what happens is They find out that their pastor's not perfect. The number of people that I've watched rise through the ranks of a church into leadership, and then once they're in leadership, they leave the church because, well, you won't believe what the pastor said, what the pastor did, what the pastor... What you found out he was what? Human being? He was a sinner? That he's got the same lust, the same problems that you've got in your life, the same financial issues, he's got the same problems you've got. He's got anger problems. He's got all the same problems that you have. You know what the problem was? You made him God. You replaced God with a person, and that person fell and proved to you that he wasn't God. And now you're upset at him for not being God. It's not okay. Right? Listen. John chapter 15, verse 5, I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, not he that abideth in church, not he that abideth with, right, a good fellowship of people, not he that abideth with his pastor or with a good spiritual leader. He that abideth in me, Christ, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit, for without me ye can do nothing. Right? So what's the conclusion of this thing? The conclusion of this thing is this, right? Listen, being compassionate, right, doesn't mean being consumed with helping others. That is not compassionate. It's ego-driven, but it's not compassionate. It is not compassionate for you to abandon your family to help another family. By the way, this is what gets more people in ministry, pastoral positions. This is what gets more of them in trouble than anything else. Is they abandon their family because they're helping some single mom in the church or some lady whose husband and her are having problems, and he steps in and he's going to fix it for them. And the problem is he becomes the source of the solution. And then now he's showing all this compassion, right? And he's perfect as far as she's concerned, right? He's got no flaws. His wife's at home. She can tell you all his flaws, but he's got no flaws, right? And so she leaves her husband and he leaves his wife because these people, right, they're perfect together, right? And they run off and then, right, they blow everything up. But we fixed the problem. No, you didn't. You just made a big mess out of everybody else's lives. That's all that happened here. Right? Listen, it's easy for that type of stuff to happen, right? You are helping somebody the best way you can when you are pointing them to Christ. That's the best possible thing you can do. Point them to Christ and set boundaries. Right? Listen, you have to care for them, but do it in a way that doesn't leave everybody else in your life high and dry. Right? Ask yourself a couple of questions, right? Pick one relationship in your life where you feel like maybe you're overstepping your boundaries. Right? Ask yourself this, am I doing something that they should be doing for themselves? Eventually, every parent gets to this point, right, where you've got to stop putting your kids' shoes on for them. They've got to do it themselves. You've got to stop picking out their clothes. They've got to start doing it themselves. Right? You've got to stop holding the toothbrush and let them brush their teeth themselves. Right? What relationship in your life are you doing something for somebody that they should be doing for themselves, right? Have I encouraged that person to depend more on Christ? Is the ultimate outcome of what you are presently doing in that person's life for them to depend more on Christ, or is it guiding them to depend more on you? Right? And then, right, am I too close to the situation? Basically, right? Am I stepping away from this? Is there enough separation in this relationship to where I've got rest in between the times that I am responsible for them or that they are coming to me? Listen, people end up in these situations all the time, right? Where you're so close to a situation that it's constant and consistent and it's always and it's every day, every moment of every day, that's all you think about and it consumes you. And it's not a positive thing, right? So let me ask you some questions, right? What's the difference between helping somebody and enabling them? I'm giving you a bunch of stuff this morning, right? But what's the difference between actually helping them versus enabling them? Yes, sir. right? Yeah, help is a temporary thing, right? But when you enable somebody, right, you're making a commitment that is going to end up extending much longer than you want it to. Help has a time period, enabling doesn't. Does that make sense? How do Galatians chapter 6 verse 2 and Galatians chapter 6 verse 5 work together when they seem like they contradict? Right? You've got to take responsibility for your own burden, right? Even if you need help with it. Right? If you need help carrying it, that's fine, but you've still got to put your shoulder under there too. Right? Does that make sense? Right? When listen, all of us, right? Well, all of us lean towards one of these verses or the other. Right? Some of us sitting in here right now, we lean towards 6:5, right? Hey. Take responsibility for yourself, mister. You got yourself in this mess, you get yourself out of it. All right? Some of us lean towards that verse pretty heavily, right? And some of us lean towards 6:2, right? No, I'm just here to help, man. I'm going to help. I'll do whatever it takes to help you get through this situation, right? But somewhere in the middle is where you want to be, right? You don't want to go overboard on one side or the other of it. So why is it so hard to say no to people who are needy? Go ahead, Allie. Yeah.
They don't even realize that they kind of do have control over the situation or something like that, so they are kind of desperate for your help.
Right.
So it makes it more like, I have to help them. Like, who else is going to do it?
Yeah. Yep. Right. Happens to you even when, like, right, you're standing, like, you go to the gas station, some guy asks you for change. Isn't it amazing how, like, your brain works? It's like, well, I should probably give it to him, like, right, like, but and you go through, like, your brain kicks into, like, hyperdrive, right? If I give it to him, then they're always going to ask, well, this is the only time you've ever seen that guy. You're probably never going to see that guy again, right? Or, right, like, if I don't give it to him, he's probably going to think, what a jerk, right? Like, you're concerned about what this guy who doesn't even have a job thinks about you, right? It's amazing, right? But it is. It's hard to say no to people. It's very difficult sometimes to say no to people. How do we encourage people to lean on Christ instead of us? What's a spiritual tool, right, that you can use that will help somebody to grow? Right, how do we push them towards Christ and away from us? Go ahead, Dad. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right? Tell them, hey, look at it, right? The Bible says this. Well, where does it say that? It's in there, right? You got Google, right? You got ChatGPT. No, right? But listen, it is important, right? That we cause people to lean on Christ, right? Not on us. What are boundaries, right? What boundaries might God be calling us to set, right? I'm not necessarily, right? I'm not asking you to tell me what relationship or anything else, right? But what are some healthy boundaries that you can set up in your life with somebody that needs help? What does a loving boundary look like? Most of us don't think the boundaries are loving at all, right? Especially the world that we live in, right? Borders are all bad, right? Go ahead, Noah. Yeah.
Helping out siblings and stuff. Plus they're really dependent on older siblings for they're still around.
Right.
So I feel like, hey, showing them, hey, this is how you do it. I'm gonna do it for you once, but from now on it's your job.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
That's a boundary to set.
Yes. Right. Time frames are a very important boundary, right? Like, look, I'll help you, but you got 30 days to get on your feet. All right. I'll tell you that's how that's how Pastor Johnston used to hire people. So did Brother Chappell, Larry, Brother Chappell's dad. But right, he would bring in, and you had 6 months to bring in enough people to pay for your own paycheck. And if you didn't, you moved on down the road, right? All right, that may seem a little extreme, but right, boundaries are an important thing, right? You let somebody move in your house for how long? Right? What's the boundary? Right? Somebody needs your financial help. What's the amount you're willing to help them with? Right? Well, listen, somebody is short on their rent. That's one thing. Somebody needs you to pay their whole rent. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Right? Let's have a conversation here. Like, I'm not paying your whole rent. So you need to get together whatever you can get together, and then we can talk. Right? Those are healthy boundaries. We need healthy boundaries in our lives. All right. We will close there, and we will be back in here in about 15 minutes for morning service.